Okay, we're all set. We're all set for what is hopefully going to be a thoroughly informative, entertaining, enjoyable evening ahead of us. So, a very, very warm welcome to A Perfect Stable, where horse health and performance come together. And Bedmax and Annabel Webb have come together to be able to give you guys, hopefully watching along, a really insightful evening that we will all be able to employ with our own horses as well. And I'm delighted to say we have got two incredible guests as well. I'm going to start with Dr. David Marlin, who is one of the world's leading equine scientists. He's got over 30 years of experience. He's had some incredible stories and being involved in top level events all over the world, but ultimately is passionate about helping keep our horses as healthy as possible. So, David, it is lovely to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Nicole. I love doing these because even if you think you've heard it all before, somebody always comes up with a question or a comment that makes you think again. And so, yeah, no, and the key really is education because, good healthcare comes from good knowledge. And say, I think we can never be reminded often enough about, how important it is to look after our horses.
Absolutely. And we're all learning every single day. And that is one thing I would say. We really want you to send in your questions. You can use the chat feature. And no question is too silly to ask. I'm sure we'll cover plenty of them as the show goes on. We've got a few already sent in, so we'll look at those as well. Our second guest, she is a Team World Championship gold medalist. She is a dual five-star winner, all-round eventing legend, Piggy March. Piggy, it is lovely to see you.
Good evening, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
Okay. First of all, where do we start? The perfect stable. David, do you want to just give us an introduction as to the overriding topic and where we're hopefully going to go this evening?
Yeah, I think the thing we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different types of horses. We all have different sometimes constraints, sometimes I don't know, financial time. If you're a livery yard, there may be constraints on what you can and can't do with your horse. But, for a lot of horses, they spend a lot of time in the stable. And we want to try and make that environment as good for them as we can. And, that may be making sure they have interaction with other horses as much as possible. It may be making sure it's as dust free as possible. Making sure that they're getting enough time to lie down. There's so much, as I say, it's a fundamental part for most horse owners of having a horse is managing that horse in the stable. And some horses never have an issue. Other horses, do have issues in the stable. Fortunately we don't tend to hear so much of horses getting cast in stables as perhaps we used to. I don't know why that is, but and again, interested to hear from anyone tonight who's on the webinar if they've had a horse getting cast. But yeah, it's about trying to make the most of the environment and the constraints that you've got to keep your horse as healthy as possible. And of course, if you're competing, we always say that healthy and well-managed horses compete probably better than those that are not so well managed in the stable.
I think that's one of the things, Piggy, that we're really interested to get your insight on this evening, actually, because ultimately it's all about high performance in lots of ways, but it is horses for courses as well. And it's about knowing your horse and understanding actually how you're going to be able to give them what's right for them to enable them to be as happy and healthy as possible as well.
Oh, no, absolutely. And like David said, we never stop learning. And I'm very interested in tonight to actually ask David some questions myself, to be able to have this opportunity to sit here with him will be fascinating, and I'm interested to learn for myself how I can improve certain areas as well. So no, it's incredibly important.
Okay. I feel like we should start with the sort of the basic stable environment, David. Let's go there to begin with, and then we can kind of bring in the other outside factors as well.
Okay, well, so the first thing I guess is what type of stable have you got? Is it a brick one? Is it a wooden one? the reason that interests me is, of course, that at certain times of the year, it's probably better off to be in a brick stable, and other times of the year, maybe better off to be in a wooden stable. Certainly, when you've got really hot weather, wooden stables can be really hot and uncomfortable, and in fact, your horse may be better off outside than inside on really hot days. But if you've got a nice brick stables can be cooler in the summer because obviously you've got shade. I mean, Piggy, what have you got? Have you got brick or have you got wood?
Yeah, we've actually got breeze blocks in our barn, and we've got very big stables. So our stables are 12 by 12. They are quite enormous, really. But it's all under. We've got 24 stables under one roof. But it seems very airy and very spacious. We do have windows out of the back and big doors each end and on the sides. So with the high light roof, and the stable walls don't go all the way up to the roof. They go as high. You know, of course, can a big one could stretch up and probably nearly sniff the other one, but not on the whole, not really. It's going to be quite large to be able to do that. But yes, all of our stables are the same, and they're breeze block and large, and it is very airy.
Okay, and Piggy, I'm struggling a little bit with your sound.
I was going to say the joy of Northamptonshire Madewell's Wi-Fi, I think, might be cutting in slightly. Are you able to sit like as close to your router as physically possible, or change the Wi-Fi? And
whether you can dial in on your phone, which might be better if you.
Oh no, this is technology that is not any use for.
We can enlist Tom's help as well.
Yes, that won't be needed. I'm ringing now. I'll be here in 2 minutes because my computers do not. Is that any better or not?
I tell you what I'll do while we're waiting for Tom to dive in to save the day. Can I ask you, David, because I've just had a comment in from Kate who says, not a question, but she does have a horse that gets cast, but he has equine asthma, so he only gets cast when it's bad.
Oh, okay, interesting. Wow, yeah, no, that's one of those moments. I would never have thought of that. So he gets cast when he's bad. Okay, what's going on there? Whether he's more stressed, whether he's kind of rolling around more if he's when his asthma's bad. That really is an interesting one. I've never put those two together. I was just about to say to Piggy, you know, in terms of your technical ability, don't worry, your technical ability and my 5-star jumping ability are probably about the same level. So it's
Can I ask you, David, in terms of, you know, we talked about the brick stables, the wooden stables, that kind of thing. Is there such a thing as the perfect stable? You know, if somebody's in the sort of dream situation whereby they can start from scratch, is there something that sort of fits all?
Well, this is really interesting. So I've been involved in designing yards and veterinary hospitals and teaching stables around the world. And they all kind of end up being a bit different because of, I mean, in this country, for example, if horses are being used in any research, for example, and research isn't, better be clear about that. When we're talking about research, it might be, let's say we're doing a trial on a new drug. Some of the earlier work may have to be done under what's called a Home Office license, and that doesn't necessarily mean that this is unpleasant stuff. It may just be giving the horses the new drug, and monitoring, the response to that drug, looking at how quickly the drug is cleared from the system. But that would have to be done under a license, and for horses that are on license procedures, the size of the stables is specified as, and I'm trying to remember what it may well be, 5 meters by 4 meters. It's a long time since I've done any of that sort of kind of work. But yeah, so the size of the stables is actually specified, and of course, a 5 meter by 4 meter stable is pretty big. I think whilst we think yes, there can be stables that are too small, and I'm often a little bit disappointed by the size of the stables at some of the events. Obviously, there's a cost implication to supplying, really big stables. But we got, some of these horses nearly 18 hands, in a sort of a 10 foot by 10 foot or 11 foot by 11 foot, they might be struggling to sort of lay down. And so yeah, I think, is there an ideal? South facing, north facing, on top of a hill, there's general things we would think of as certainly size of stable, certainly ventilation. Certainly I'd be going for brick or breeze block if I had the choice, because that's better from a temperature regulation point of view. I think horses being able to see each other is very important. We often, there's a lot of work actually that Hartpury are doing looking at social interaction between horses in stables, but it's not something we probably, there's a lot of opinions on it. But
can I butt in, David? Is it working or?
No.
A little bit jumpy still.
Yeah, a bit jumpy.
I can hear you. You just don't sound as beautifully eloquent as normal, Pigs.
We're going to swap with the iPad, and I hope that's improving. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you. It wouldn't be a webinar if we didn't have some form of. I'd be disappointed if there wasn't some form of technical issue. I want to come on when Piggy comes back. Actually, I really want to talk about traveling. Because I think that's a really important point. Airflow, David, first of all. I think there is so much conversation around, an American barn or outdoor stables and airflow, but you don't want a drafty stable, but you want good airflow as such. What is constituted as a good, appropriate amount of airflow?
Well, that's an interesting one. So really, the amount of airflow you need is related to a couple of things. One is that the horses are using up oxygen and producing carbon dioxide, and one of the measurements of air quality we would use in human environments is in trying to ensure that carbon dioxide doesn't rise too high. If it does start to creep up, then that's an indication that you haven't got enough air changes. In stables, it's a little bit more complicated because, unfortunately, they are by nature dusty environments. And of course, the dust comes from the bedding, the dust comes from the forage. Those are the primary sources. The dust also comes from the horse, because when a horse comes in from the outside, it's covered in whatever it was standing in outside. So the horse brings in pollens and dust, and then of course if you groom the horse in the stable, you put all that dust into the environment. So if you've got a dusty environment, if you're putting using a dusty bedding, if you're using a dry hay that's quite dusty, then you want more air changes per hour to try and clear that as quickly as possible. Interestingly, if you muck out a stable and we measure the amount of dust as you're mucking out, it will take about 45 minutes for that dust to settle. And it's the problem is you can't usually see it. It's only on those days when you get the sun shining through the right way and you've just mucked out and you go, oh my God, look at all that dust. And you see those classic photographs of, it's like a cloud. And most of the time we don't realise.
I love that, David. You've answered one of the questions that we had sent in before this evening, actually, which is, we're always told take your horse out of the stable while you do the stable because it's going to be dustier. But actually, how long do you leave it? So about 45 minutes would be ideal.
Yeah, that's ideal. And the same, don't don't groom your horse in the stable would be another one. Especially if there's a lot of dust outside, because all you're doing is the dust that's on your horse, you're then putting that into the environment. And I'm sure a lot of people are saying, "Oh, well, is it really that important?" My horse doesn't cough. I don't think I've got a problem. What's interesting about the horse's breathing is that when a horse is unfit, when it's untrained, the main thing that limits its performance is going to be the muscle, heart. But in a trained horse, it's the respiratory system that is the limiting factor. And that's because, contrary to what you might read in a lot of books, the lungs don't actually change with training. They don't get better. So the respiratory capacity of a horse is the same after training as it is before. And this is why a lot of us make such a fuss about really getting on top of air quality and checking that your horse has a healthy respiratory system, because you don't need very much respiratory disease to have a negative effect on performance. And it's even worse with people. If we've got respiratory disease, generally we'll be coughing. If a horse is coughing on a sort of regular basis, and even if it's just when you start warming them up, if a horse is coughing fairly regularly when you warm them up, or you hear them cough occasionally in the stable, that probably means they've got some degree of respiratory disease. But if they're not coughing, it doesn't mean they're healthy, because it takes quite a lot to make horses cough. So often we'll scope horses just on the off chance, just as part of a general health check, and find they've actually got quite moderate respiratory disease, even though they're possibly performing at quite a high level.
So, David, am I working better now?
Well, you sound lovely.
Oh, hallelujah. Thank you, Thomas. You can go now.
He's dismissed. Thanks.
So I'm very sorry about that, everyone. So like that fascinates me, to be honest, because on a few points there. So the cough, I think I've spoken to you about it once before, but very rarely you'll hear a horse cough in the stable, or you'd like to think so, but sometimes we're very, you pay a lot of attention to it. You're mucking out in the morning and you'll hear a horse cough once, and you look to see which horse is that, and was it just one cough eating and it had a tickle of the food, or a little choke, but you definitely note which one was that, and you certainly wait to see if it does another one at all in the stable, or ridden at the beginning, or whatever. Scoping is something that actually I haven't really been into big time yet for eventing, and I'm just interested your views on this. I probably missed a few points from the one cough in the morning to actually scoping a horse generally, but it isn't something that I'm very familiar with, unless I feel the horse is sick or sorry or coughing a lot or performing badly. Because it's obviously, is it a little bit invasive? Is it something that you really don't do unless you have to, or is it not invasive at all? It's something that should be part of a regular checkup for horses at top level.
Those are really good points. I think, in a lot of racing yards there, and maybe it's changed now, but definitely went through a phase of every horse being scoped sort of every couple of weeks, and
okay.
There is a small risk to scoping, and most of the vets who are doing a lot of scoping, really, it's a quick procedure. There's pretty much no risk. It is invasive because you're passing something into the airway and the trachea. So there's two sort of levels of investigation that generally happen with scoping. The first is in a horse that isn't sedated, and it doesn't have any other implications. Basically, that's just what we call effectively looking into the trachea.
Yeah.
And that can be accompanied by a tracheal wash where the
Okay.
vet doing the scoping will put a catheter down, a sterile catheter, squirt some saline in, and
Yeah.
as the trachea goes down, it goes to the lowest point and then it goes uphill into the lung.
Right.
The saline's squirted up here in the uphill bit and it runs back, and then you can bring the scope back and you can suck that liquid up. And what that saline has got then is it's a wash of that part of the trachea, of the surface, and we can look to see what sort of cells are there. We can try and grow bacteria. We can look at the quality of the mucus and kind of make an assessment from that as to whether there's, an ongoing viral infection or respiratory infection, or whether it's an allergy.
Yeah.
I think it's tricky. If you've got a horse that is prone to respiratory infections or prone to equine asthma and prone to flare-ups, might be the sort of thing you would have done more so than a horse that never really has problems.
Yeah.
Shipping fever is the one that I kind of get most twitchy about, because we know that when you start going over journeys of about 8 hours, 10 hours on a horse box or on a plane, the head up position tends to increase the growth of bacteria in the respiratory tract, and those bacteria are there anyway. Most of they're bacteria that we find there, but in the normal circumstances they don't cause an infection. But given the right sort of circumstances like stress, dehydration, head up position, those bacteria recognize that there's a change and they start to multiply and you get an infection. And so, we often see horses arriving at competitions after, say, 10 or 12 hours with a slight elevation in temperature.
Okay.
Those will then recover over the next 24, 48 hours without any need for intervention. But you will have a small proportion that develop pneumonia, shipping fever.
Yeah.
And there are horses that are prone to it. So if you have a horse that is prone to it, those are the ones I would definitely be looking to get the vet in to scope maybe 4 weeks before you're going to travel, so that if you have to have treatment, you've got time for the treatment to have an effect.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I've got a horse at the minute that just went to Scotland and ran very badly. But we took the temperature a lot, and we'd taken bloods before we went, and obviously no coughing at all. But twice he's done a long journey, 3 times he's done a long journey, and once he ran very well, and twice he really hasn't. And he sort of pulled himself up and very out of character. And we, got him home to then take bloods again, which were mildly wrong. The white cells had gone all over the place. But scoping, actually, because he ate fine and seemed fine, was not, that's actually, like I said earlier, it hasn't been, the respiratory problems haven't been something that I know much about. So it's, and obviously we've got very clean stables and the right bedding, the bedding that you need, the stables that you need. So I've never thought of it as much of a problem. But that's fascinating, because that could easily be then an underlying problem that we're unaware of and need to look into.
Yeah, it could be related to transport. I mean, one of the problems with traveling is changing environment, and a lot of go to events and just use whatever bedding's supplied, and often the bedding isn't necessarily the best quality. What's your sort of management for traveling? How do you tend to approach taking horses to competition?
Well, we do keep everything actually the same when we go away. Like we take our bed mats with us. We take all our feed from home, all our hay or our haylage, and it's even bed mats in the wagon. For the shavings for their journey. But even when you're supplied with your free 2 bales of bedding wherever you may be, we actually stick to the same always.
It's interesting. Sorry, Nicole, go on.
No, you're right. I was going to pick up on that because we sort of touched upon it in terms of the sort of the ideal stable and size and how structure and everything else. And that feels like it links in quite well to when you do travel, that actually all of a sudden you're in a field, you're in temporary environments, or you're in a more permanent structure that might have housed other horses more recently. And yes, we've got some brilliant biosecurity protocols in place, but it is a little bit more, you get what you're given. So how do you manage that with your team, Piggy? And do you have a preference when you travel with your horses like that? Obviously keeping the basic things the same, but the stables are the stables.
The stables are the stables, yes. For at home, we very much like every horse has its own stable. I do not stable swap at all. A horse's stable is their home. Obviously, you get to a competition and your stable is your stable. Sometimes you have the indoor temporary stables, which for eventing we're very lucky because we're normally in a grass field, and it's very important for us because our horses are used to a lot of turnout and they're used to a very well ventilated barn. And so when we're at competitions, they would be taken out for hand grazes a good few times a day, just to try and keep everything, clean as possible. But your stable is where your stable is. But, nowadays it's very professional, really, that you arrive somewhere and the stables are already pretty clean. You might end up at the odd place, and it is what it is, but it is, the standards are very high everywhere you go, especially, competing international events and things. It is pretty luxury for the horses most of the time in our game and going eventing and being at international. So, it's just keeping everything as much the same as possible. Having the heads down is a massive thing that I like. I'm not they've got to have a hay net if they've got to have a hay net, but I like my food for the horse being on the floor, so it's as natural as possible that they are in that. They do get their heads down, and especially if they have to have a hay net because they just trash it through their bed, especially straight when they get off a lorry, however long the journey really, but they arrive somewhere, it's important that they go and eat grass, or they are putting their heads down straight away, so that they're not just going to eat a meal with their bucket hung over the door or their water, their hay net up high. Even if they are messy, I think that's a very important time that the food is down, because quite often it's when the noses will clear. And so, little things like that I'm very, very aware of, and like my little things to be, after travel, and it's as natural for the horse as possible. And, with water buckets, even we have a big yard and a big barn of stables, but I specifically asked for not water drinkers, which is a pain in the ass for staff load and things, but I actually really like to know how much horses are drinking, how much they drank on a night, what is, some horses you see that the food is in their water, their waters are dirtier, they get emptied every day, washed out with a brush and clean fresh water in, and you can actually see with some there's gunk at the bottom of their water more than, is that food, are they not digesting properly, all that sort of thing, as much as the obvious points of, are they drinking enough, are they, is this their normal routine, and that sort of thing, and drinking, being hydrated is very important. And I've recently learned from actually traveling a lot with the Hong Kong team that travel a lot for eventing, and they have nut water for their traveling. So they have a bucket of water, or a shallow bucket of water, and they put a scoop of nuts in for their traveling, and it smells, and I think the water is has a bit of a nut feel to it, and the horses always go to it to take a good drink. And I thought that was brilliant for when they travel a lot and are always offered their drink, that they really go to it and do have a drink, and it's teaching them to drink, which it can be a nightmare, and also one that hasn't performed well on a long journey, and I hadn't done things like that. So it's like, is it hydrated enough? And I found that was an interesting method, and definitely one that I'm quite keen to use. But all these little things are important, and as David said, in the travel they can't always get their heads down, and so if it's a long journey and they need to come off, getting the head down is a very important factor there.
David, when we're talking about heads down and clearing, if there is a little bit of gunk or something that doesn't seem quite as desirable as it might appear, is that an immediate red flag, or is that normal for them to have got something out the system? What is normal?
I think it's more, we always talk about kind of horse healthcare, about not usually getting too panicked about one single thing. Okay, yes, if your horse has got a temperature of sort of 40, then that is something serious, and you don't need really anything else to go on. Your horse has got quite a severe temperature. But if your horse has got a little bit of sort of white mucus, but he's eating okay, he seems to be exercising okay, he's not coughing, that's not necessarily a panic. If you've got a bit of mucus and he's coughing and you don't feel he's quite right, then you're starting to think, okay, maybe this needs a bit more investigation. So I think it's generally about common sense. And also if it was a little bit yesterday and it's a bit more today, then again that's an increase in level of sort of not panic, but it's something to pay attention to. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of really interesting things Piggy said. The automatic waterers, there's a couple of studies that were done showing that horses drink less from automatic waterers than from buckets. And definitely some horses that I've worked with, been around, really, really drink almost like half as much with the automatic waterers. They don't like them. Now, if you are going to have automatic waterers, the much bigger ones that are a lot quieter seem to be, I would say, less likely to put horses off. But the small bowl ones, I would never use those, especially if your horse isn't used to them. So I'd always be taking buckets with me, and I'd always use the buckets. If that's what your horse has at home, then that's what I'd be taking to events. And traveling is interesting. There's a lot of us talk about one study that was done quite a few years ago now, but if you look at the energy that horses have to expend, I don't know, we're obviously not really supposed to be in the back of horse boxes with horses when they're traveling, but of course from time to time for various reasons we do. If you look at how much the horse is having to move and adjust to, even on a fairly straight road, on a good lorry, there's a lot of activity, and they actually end up using somewhere between, it's been estimated, the energy of walking and trotting. So an hour on a horse box is actually quite tiring for a horse, because it's got to make those continual muscular adjustments. And as I say, if you don't believe me, stand in the back of the horse box and see how much you have to to balance. So traveling's quite tiring. It's a change in routine, and one of the other things that happens when we go from home to competitions, often a lot of yards will have a period where it's fairly quiet. Maybe from late morning, maybe to mid-afternoon. It might be a bit quieter. What we find when we have competitions where we enforce stable closures, so for example in Tokyo, because of the heat during the day, the stables were closed down really from about sort of late morning till about 3, 4 o'clock. When I go round making the checks on the temperature, humidity, air quality, I reckon probably 3/4 of the horses are lying down. Now I know if there was people walking around, those horses probably wouldn't be lying down. So there's a couple of other things we're doing. One is we're shutting the light down. We're turning off the main lights, and we've got shades on the windows, so it's fairly dark in there, but it's quiet, and there's no people going in and out. As I say, majority of those horses are lying down, and I think that's one of the things often at competition they may not get, because there's constant activity through the stables, whereas they may get quieter periods at home and time to rest. And as you probably know, unless horses are laying down, they don't get REM sleep, which is the really well, all sleep's important, but REM sleep is really important for restoration, for repair, for recovery, for relaxation. It's a vital part. If horses don't get REM sleep, then they're going to be compromised.
How much REM sleep would be enough, David? I mean, I'd love a good solid 8 hours a night, but I wouldn't expect to see a horse lying down for 8 hours.
No. Well, you get sort of periods of REM sleep at different stages of sleep. I mean, probably we're talking about laying flat out for sort of half an hour at a time, I think. Sleep. In fact, Linda Greening at Hartpury has done some webinars and written some articles about sleep, and she's been looking at sleep. She's probably one of the experts on horse sleep at the moment. But yeah, I mean, you want to be seeing them. When you see them flat out, and they're basically, that's it. They're gone. They're just lying flat out. That's an essential recovery type of sleep for them to be, and they can only get the REM sleep when they are lying like that in what we call lateral recumbency.
I like that, and we see that quite a bit, because in the summer, or once when the weather's fine and the land's not too wet, we turn a lot of our horses out at night, and then they come in first thing in the morning for breakfast. And on normal routine days, I would always leave those ones to ride later, because they always have a flat out siesta for a good while in the morning, which is great. And I really like that with them. I think it's important that they do. But, on normal days when you do have normal routines, I'm definitely one that has to get up and ride horses first thing. I like them to have a routine. And for me, if I've got other things to do in a day, it would be afternoon time, because I like them to feel like they get up, they do their work, they go to their field for an hour or two, whatever it might be, but they have a siesta time on normal days where they've had their groom. They, after lunch, there is an hour, a quiet hour where the guys go and have, the staff can go and have their hour, and the yard is quiet. Not every day can be like this, and it's not all the time, but it is how we try to have a system that gets them worked, get them to the field, get them back, their brush, they've got their rug on or whatever, they get, rugged up more later. But quite often that's the time that I might walk down or do a Piggy TV video, or I might go and just check legs, because I like the yard to be quiet so my brain can think. Because when it's like the hustle and bustle, you're distracted a bit, and I just like hearing nothing but maybe munching or snoring or just breathing. And it's lovely to see they really do have their siesta in that time, and quite often they are lying down, or they're all stand up half snoozing, which I don't know if that counts at all, but it's definitely rest time. And it gives me pleasure to see it or hear it or witness it. So it's but I'm glad it is very important for them, because obviously nighttime they've got all their own time as well. Anyway, we do a late check, we check them at 8:30 at night, and then they're not seen again till 7 o'clock in the morning on a normal day. And so you know that they have, a lot of their time. But I think it's quite nice to have the routine or know that they've got a siesta break at times if they can do.
Can I ask then, we had a question that came in, and actually I think it ties in nicely to this. So the question was, do you use any cameras or technical device to monitor your horses overnight? Thinking of installing a camera. My husband says I'm being overprotective. Personally, I don't think being overprotective. I'd like to look in the stable. And I think it'd be a nice way to check in without disturbing them. Piggy, what's your take on that? Do you have it? Would you like it?
We have a lot of cameras around the yard, from the drive up round the yard, like security cameras. But I haven't got cameras in the stable, like folding cameras and that. But we all live on site and we're very close to the stables, and so a bang is heard. If a horse was to get cast or something, it is you hear it instantly. There's plenty of us that do live on site. But no, all our cameras are dotted all around the outside of all the stables, seeing that we've got no intruders. But no, we can hear all of ours. We can hear them snore from the house. So it's no, I don't think I think I'd start watching them.
It's like horse TV, isn't it? All of a sudden you get sucked into actually.
Yeah. What are they up to?
I guess that is, if you don't live on site and you've perhaps only got the one or two horses, that actually is a good way of checking in on them, as to maybe you never see them lie down in their stable, but actually they do it at 11 o'clock every night, and kind of you can check in on that. Can we ask about environmental enrichment? This is one of the things that I'm so fascinated to dive into. So those little things, David, you touched upon, them being able to see other horses. That feels like quite an obvious one. But maybe there's other slightly more imaginative things, toys, mirrors, and so on and so forth. Piggy, what's your take on that?
Oh, God. Well, I actually wrote down on a piece of paper when you were talking earlier, because I couldn't butt in because my technology wasn't working. But I was like seeing the other ones. Like, I don't like bars in the stables between horses, because I find they fight, they pull faces, they run their teeth up and down the bars between each one. It's like, if I was designing my own perfect yard, I would rather they could see them ahead, or put a head round to be able to know that they've got a horse next door. But I'm not so keen on the bars or the cage that's between them, because it's noisy, and they sort of like to fight, feed time and things like that. It's like they can get a bit rowdy, which personally I don't particularly like. No, I don't think I've got into toys for them yet. Oh God, no, no, I haven't. I think ours but ours it's a competition yard. They're worked, they're out in the field, they come back in, they're in a routine, and they usually, I'd like to think, they weren't bored or needing that sort of thing. They've got lovely big boxes, and they always seem very, it's a good routine, and they seem very relaxed and happy. But obviously the ones, it's not always the case. You can get some on box rest that, yes, life's a bit sad for them. So, sometimes the licks or the trickle balls that you can get, those nuts that trickle out, that seems a bit of sport for an hour or two, that they kick that round. And maybe I'd quite like that if I was hooped up for a day. But no, I don't know about horse toys, I'm afraid. David might know more there.
Well, it is an area that I guess there's been increasing interest in sort of the last 10 years or so, and there's a few research papers out. Again, I think some of them are quite sort of inventive. Some of the things I've seen, I'm thinking any of my horses would rip that apart in like 5 seconds. And you kind of sometimes think about different horses' personalities. Some horses would be quite happily nudging a ball around and getting a few nuts, and others would be driven crazy by the fact they can't get all straight away. And if they've got grazing, they probably don't need toys. If they're stable and they've probably got plenty of forage and they can see other horses, maybe they do or don't need toys. I guess if you had a horse that seemed to be unhappy or unsettled in the stable, it's probably worth trying anything. I mean, music is one of the other things that there's, again, increasing interest in. There's been a few studies. Horses don't seem to like Radio 1. I'm definitely don't
Heart FM, surely Heart FM's all right.
I don't even like Radio 2 anymore.
Is it classic? Do they like the classics?
Yeah, so
okay.
Gentle types of classical music, not the 1812 overture, not the really loud stuff, but gentle sort of flowing classical music, country and western. They don't appear to like jazz, more heavy rock. I'm sure they don't like rap, even though that hasn't probably been tried. But they do seem to have a preference for sort of the more relaxing type of music, and probably not things like, I don't know, Talk FM, where everybody on there seems to be very angry all the time. That all the talk programs seem to be. I'm sure that can't be very settling for the horses. Definitely not the Jeremy Vine show.
Yes, no. I mean, I guess lots of different voices as well would just make them feel like they're in a slightly different environment. Hannah Turner's just sent a message: Classic FM on while she's in the lorry. Small portable radio hung in the horse area made a huge difference to stress levels whilst traveling. Also hates Radio 1. So, I mean, I don't even know who the main presenter is on Radio 1 these days. That's how I've definitely reached my midlife. But not a fan. Can I ask then, actually, because this is coming into quite a important time of year with bonfire night coming up, David, and like lots of fireworks and things like that. And people might often think of things that they might do in their environment to help keep their horses settled. What advice could you give them at this time of year?
I think I've seen horses that just don't react to fireworks at all, and I've seen others that just run around the box and injure themselves. So I think, again, if you know you've got a horse that is affected, there's two real approaches I would say you can use. One is a desensitization, where you have recordings of fireworks and you play them very quietly, and then you just gradually increase the volume. If your horse starts to get upset, you stop, then go back to a lower volume. So a kind of desensitization approach. It's a bit like people who are scared of spiders. You show a picture of a spider, and then you take them into a room where there's a spider in the box over the other side. You gradually expose them more and more.
I don't think that would work for me, David, but maybe one day I'll try.
What, not?
Don't try.
Not with the spiders, no.
Okay, all right. We'll pass. And the other one is to try and provide a level of background, and that's where music can be quite useful, because if it's really quiet and there's a sudden loud noise against a very quiet background, that's quite a change. Whereas if you've got a background of music and there's a noise, it doesn't seem to have the same effect on horses. They seem to be less reactive if there's already a background of other noise that you then get that loud noise comes over. And I mean, sometimes you're not going to be able to, things happen. I've got a video on my website. I don't know, you probably haven't seen, but there was a jet went over and there was a sonic boom, and the horse just goes like that, and then just that's it. Just goes. What was that? And it was really, really loud. individual horses. I think if your horse is at risk of injuring itself, talking to your vet about sedation. Again, some owners say that sedating horses for fireworks seems to make them worse, doesn't actually help. But I think desensitization, starting now, you've got, probably 2 or 3 weeks. It's probably enough time to have an effect. Or introducing some background sounds, music, to kind of try and reduce the impact when they do hear the noise.
You made a really important point there, I think, the introducing, because it feels, natural. One, bonfire night is the 5th of November, but fireworks don't just appear on bonfire night. It's like bonfire week, isn't it? They're kind of just spread out Friday, Saturday, and so on and so forth. But also, I feel like naturally as humans, we know they're coming. So we tend to get a little bit more anxious, especially if we know our horses aren't particularly comfortable with them. And all of a sudden, one night you stick the radio on, you're kind of pacing up and down, looking to see what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. The horses are immediately going to be like, this is different. Is there an argument to say, okay, I'm going to start playing Classic FM at the end of October, ease it in so that actually it's not just wham bam, something's different, and actually there's something that's going to happen?
Definitely. Starting now, you have likely to have a much greater chance of success in moderating your horse's behaviour around firework time if you start playing the music to them now. And as you say, not playing it in the morning, probably you're going to have to play it in the evening, because we know that it's not really until you start getting dark that the fireworks start being let off.
Okay, that's really, really useful advice. Thank you. I wanted to ask, before we start to come on to questions, so if you've got any questions, we've got a few that have been sent in as well, so keep them coming and we'll start to go through them in a moment. From a business side of things, Piggy, you obviously have a busy yard, and it's smaller than some yards, and unbelievably professional as a team that manage it. But you'd have horses that might have been in a different routine, that would come in from a different yard. You have owners that might like things in a different way or have certain kind of preferences. How do you manage all of those things to kind of, I guess, not please everybody, but keep everybody happy and on board while still staying true to your system?
I think that the important thing there is doing what I think is right and being honest and true to myself and my horses and the knowledge that you've tried to pick up over the years and how you like things. I do have a particular way that I like my yard to be, that I like my stables to be, that I like, the horses to feel that there's the routine. And I like it when people come to the yard and they're like, it's quiet. Your horses, it's not a noisy yard at all. It doesn't feel like a busy yard, even though sometimes there are 30 horses there, because everyone knows their place, everyone knows the routine. It's got normally a good structure to it. I mean, we all know that days go Pete Tong and everyone's flying around or whatever, but I like a certain way a stable to be for them. Every horse is different, but I think I like a horse to be very comfortable. I like a horse to have a good night's sleep. My older horses will still have probably quite a big bed with nice banks all around the edge. Not too big, too high, because actually they're all rubber matted, our floors of our stables. And I like to have the shavings not be there too long and get too stale. So that's another reason that they can get dusty again. I mean, I might be going back over things that David said earlier in the conversation because I was off camera, sorry. But it is, to rotate, to take a bank away and put a clean new bale of shavings in a bank. So it's always a fresh bed, but quite a lot of the young ones or the ones that are really dirty. So it's cost effective, or that the horse is out in the field a lot, can just have a square bed in the corner because it just suits that one. But I like the stable to look clean, fresh. The routine there is for the horses, and you've got a happy, comfortable horse, and I like people to walk down the yard and feel like, sometimes you'd like to curl up or go to sleep in a stable because it's, a clean, friendly, happy, peaceful, but hopefully good vibe environment. And so, and I think it's just being honest. You have things how you want it to look. It's clean, but it's used. It's not like you're cleaning, you're disinfecting everything every single day. It's used, but it's like well swept up. The front of the beds, the water buckets, the old hay that was there. The beds rotate around the banks, and nothing just gets a bit old or a bit dusty. But trying to keep cost effective as well. But yes, I like for sponsors or for owners to be able to rock up at any time and think that it's a happy, healthy environment, and that's the only way I would like to do it. But I think it's also as a business point, you want things to look how you want to look, but you've also got to act in a way that a lot of people's horses are their children, but they're also mine as well. It isn't a job, it's a lifestyle. Our life with horses, it runs through your blood, through your veins. It's not, that's work time, that's home time. They are part of the family, whether it's the people there that are working there, whether it's the horses, whether it's your owners. It is, I would like to think, a good, healthy, honest relationship. And there's always going to be times that your horse isn't well, you don't perform well, your horse is lame, whatever it might be. But for me, it's being able to communicate, not hide, know that we're all trying to do the same thing on the same page, and you're just trying to get the best from everyone and every horse, and have things how you like it, and the rest is a bonus when it goes well. And it's the bad days which comes with everyone having horses, I'm afraid. However well you think you're looking after them or riding them or caring for them, they like to do silly things themselves, and they're like us. They get sick sometimes, they do things wrong. But I think it's just trying to, I like to always think I go to bed at night and I sleep well, knowing that I did all I could. I've got a happy healthy horse. I'm doing the best that I can for him and the people there, and that's what's the most important thing to me.
Love that, Piggy. Love that. I've been to the yard, and I can actually say that I saw one of the beds. Look, it was an empty stable, if you're listening and wondering what I was up to, but literally an empty stable. I could have gone in, closed the door, had a quiet little nap, and thought I'm just going to catch 20 here. I'd take 30 minutes of REM sleep, no worries at all. Okay, bedding. I feel like it's such a deep topic, isn't it? Excuse the pun. There we go. You've got a plethora of choices. Bedmax are supporting this webinar alone. And if you think you've got Bedmax, you've got Little Max, you've got Strawmax, but there's so many different options on the market. Where do we go? What should we be looking for in an ideal world, David, to kind of say, okay, this is what is going to suit the stable setup that I've got, first of all, and the kind of horse that I've got?
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess the first thing I'm going to say is I'm not a massive fan of deep littering, because if you can smell ammonia in a stable, then that's already at a level that will be causing irritation to your horse's airways, to your airways, actually. So once you smell ammonia, that's a bad thing. You don't. I use fancy devices to measure the dust in stables. You don't need that. All you need is a friend who's an asthmatic, and you get them to go and stand in your stable.
Crash test dummy.
Yeah, and it's like the canary in the lamp. If they start coughing and say, "Oh, my chest is starting to feel tight," you haven't got a very clean stable. And as we said, the problem is that you can't necessarily see how clean your bedding, or how dust-free your bedding is. There's no such thing as dust-free. I've never seen a dust-free bedding yet. There is low dust, and pretty much everyone says their products are low dust. or dust free. We've tested them; they're not. And we can, we can test beddings and measure how much dust is in them, how much of the different molds are in them. What you want is a low dust bedding that is easy to work with, that is absorbent, and the horses lay down on. And to be honest, people worry horses lay down on concrete. They'll lay down on anything. If they want to lay down, they will lay down. Usually, when horses don't lay down, it can often be related to orthopedic issues, that undiagnosed orthopedic issues. So this is just a little anecdote, but there was a very well known, really good dressage rider, and she was saying to me, "There's something wrong with this horse. Nobody is, everyone says I'm imagining things." She said, "I know there's something wrong with this horse." And we put a sensor on it to measure how much time it was lying down. And basically, this horse wasn't lying down at all. It was completely exhausted. She got her vet back, and her vet said, "Okay, yeah, I did some injections in the back," and the horse laid down for about 8 hours. Absolutely exhausted. And she was absolutely right that there was something wrong. And so that was a back problem. But yeah, I would. Price obviously does come into it for people, but do you know what? Buying a bedding that's maybe a couple of pounds cheaper isn't necessarily saving you money, because if that bedding is so dusty, you're going to end up in 2 months' time with a vet bill for a couple of £1,000 for asthma investigation and then ongoing treatment for asthma. Also, potentially the impact on your horse's performance if you're competing. It's not worth really skimping on bedding. You use the best bedding that you can. The same as soaking hay for me, or using haylage, good ventilation, not mucking out. Skip out with the horse in the stable, fine, but if you're going to muck out the box, get the horse out. Same with grooming. Groom outside if you can, not in the box. Because these are, horses are the ultimate athlete. They are so athletic. They are so on the edge of what is physically possible. Any compromise to them, whatever it is, lameness, respiratory disease, colic, we know it has a massive impact on them, and it's costly. It's costly in money. It's costly in all the time we've invested to try and get them to where they are, and then suddenly we've got a problem. We can't compete. Disappointment. If you're running a business, you've got sponsors, you've got owners. It's a massive pressure. And even if you just keep a horse for pleasure, again, if your horse is spending more than a few hours a day in the stable, having a low dust environment is really essential. I think it just often gets overlooked.
Can I pick up on that and say depth of bedding then, David? Because we're not deep littering, which kind of means, you kind of think a deep bed is going to be a more comfortable bed. Is that the case? But actually, we're not deep littering. So we perhaps, like Piggy says, want to make sure that the turnover of bedding is kept quite frequent. Is there an optimum depth of bed for a good night's sleep, or is it horses for courses a little bit? And
again, individual variation. If your horse has got a fairly thick rug on and 3 or 4 inches of bedding and rubber mats, your horse is probably going to be fairly comfortable. The bedding's there really to absorb the urine, to keep the feces in one place, and it's there, for a little bit of comfort. But as I say, I think we can get, the difference between a foot thick bed and a 6-inch bed is probably to the horse. The horse doesn't really, I don't think, cares.
Okay, that's perfect. That actually, we had a message in from Dawn. There were a few messages about depth of bedding that came in beforehand as well. But Dawn said she has clay floor, uses wood pellets and shavings. and has found the horses sleeping directly on the clay using shavings as a toilet, which sounds very sensible to actually go and use. That's, you've got your horses very well trained, Dawn, is what I would say. But concerned that they don't sleep enough, and basically should the bed be any deeper. But if they're choosing to go and sleep on a certain part, do you take it that they're pretty comfortable with that?
Yeah, I mean, it is very hard to know how long they're lying down. Some of there's a few artificial intelligence camera systems now that we've been looking at, that most of these started off as folding alarms, but they've moved into being able to analyze how much time the horses are spending, say, moving, lying down. And really, that's the only way we know, is by either the old way was we used time lapse sort of video cameras, which took an image every second, and we used to have to make the students go through, look through the videos and say, well, between this time and this time the horse was lying down, between this time and this time it was eating. As I say, these AI systems are becoming quite interesting because they are able to tell us about behavior in the stable. And that's interesting from, say, if you want to know how much time your horse is lying down. But what they're also good at is telling you when there's a change in the horse's behavior. So a change in behavior, for example, a number of the companies are trying to look at colic. So trying to identify increased risk of colic. So they give you an alert. And I think that's one of the things we always worry about when we're not with horses, is probably colic. And again, in some environments, colic's a lot more common. Colic would be probably much more common in some racing yards than it probably would be in, say, eventing yards or show jumping yards. But, if you've got a horse that's prone to repeated bouts of colic, having something that potentially warned you. What was interesting with one of the companies, I looked at their data, and they had really low rates of colic compared to what I would expect for that number of horses that they were monitoring. And it took me a while to work it out. But what was happening was that the owners were getting the alert that there was a moderate risk of colic. So they were then going and taking the horse out of the stable or calling the vet. So their rate of colic was reduced because they were getting this early warning and they were actually changing something. They were making an intervention. So I think that's going to be one of the things that will become much more commonplace, I think, in the not too far future. Obviously, what we're interested in is how accurate are they. We don't want to be called out of bed every night, sort of 3 times, because your horse is colicking when it's just, I don't know, it's just playing with its water bucket or something.
Your Apple Watch sleep chart will not be impressed.
No.
Your Whoop or whatever it's called. I've got quite an in-depth question, which I'm going to put to you for any suggestions. So again, depth of bedding for a restful night's sleep with or without rubber mats. But it goes on. Have an asthmatic horse and stable her and her 2 other horses in our barn, which has a dirt/clay floor, which isn't concrete, and concreting is not an option. We use wood pellets and Little Max shavings. The urine turns the dirt to mud and can't soak away through the floor due to the compaction of the clay, and we can't drain it off, so we soak it up with the pellets. Any tips on whether a different system might be better? The preference was to deep litter, adding more pellets and shavings as the urine creates dips in the floor, but my understanding is this could cause issues for the asthmatic horse, which is all new to us. David?
Yeah, I mean, again, it really comes back to, if you can smell urine, then your system's not particularly working too well. If you can only smell urine when you take the bed up, that's fine. If you take the bed up and put down a new bed and you can't smell urine, then you're doing okay. There are some compounds that you can put into the floor. So there are things called zeolites, which will absorb ammonia. The thing is that the ammonia comes from it does come from the urine, but not directly. So urine in healthy horses is sterile. Should be no bacteria in it. There should be no ammonia in it. The ammonia comes from when protein is digested. part of it is excreted as something called urea, and bacteria that are in the floor convert the urea to ammonia. So that's where the ammonia is coming from. It's not coming directly from the urine. So sterilizing the floor will reduce the ammonia production. Having a clean bedding, we make measurements on beddings, a thing called total viable count, which measures all the things that are living in that bedding. And the lower the total viable count, the more sterile the bedding is. So again, all that we've got all that sort of stuff on the website on the different beddings. Some of the beddings are really dirty. They've got a lot of bacteria in them. If you put urine on those beddings, they're going to produce a lot of ammonia. Other beddings, depending on how they're produced. I mean, for example, Bedmax use high temperature sterilization, and there's very little living things on Bedmax shavings, so they'll tend to not produce so much ammonia. So yeah, potentially sterile. You have to be careful with disinfectants around stables and horses, but treating the floor to kill off as much of the bacteria as possible will reduce the amount of ammonia, and using a bedding that is low in bacteria as well. So it's not the horse that's producing the ammonia, it's bacteria in the environment that are converting the urea that the horse excretes in the urine into ammonia.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, if you've got any other questions, if you're listening along and you've got any other questions, even if it's something we've talked about already and you just want us to dive a little bit deeper or clarify it for you, please send them in. I wanted to pick up on one actually, and I think this has come up in a couple of the questions. Coming into winter, there might not be as much turnout, the fields get muddy and bare, and all of a sudden the daylight hours are significantly reduced. Likewise, significant changes in temperature. So, Piggy, how do you manage it in your yard in the winter compared to summer? What changes?
We obviously don't turn out as much when the fields do get wet, but we still would have windows open during the day, but we'd shut them at night time. I mean, a lot of the event horses will be holidaying now, so quite a lot of them go out. For me, an event horse having a holiday now would be out in a big field, shoes off, rug on or off, depending how early he went out, fed out in the field, either hay or the hard feed or both. And then when they actually come back in and get the shoes on and start the road work or whatever, it's not, I feel that they've had a good stint in the field. So actually when it's cold and the weather's nasty and you've then clipped them and getting going, I don't feel they really miss it so much. And they're not out there just in the wet pulling their shoes or, trashing the fields for the spring when you do want to turn out. But there are horses, some do need to keep turning out for special need, if they've got needs that have to, or, your facility doesn't, you can't ride so much, you're working or whatever it might be. But, we have a walker, and they would go on, they would leave the stable 2 to 3 times a day that time of year, because I like them to move. But unless it was appalling weather, they still have the doors open and the windows open. Unless the weather's coming in and drowning them, it's still an important factor. But obviously a lot more rugs are on that sort of time of year. The clipping happens and you have to, it's harder work, but we tend not to turn out that time of year. But they also ad lib hay. That's even more important when they're not turning out, that the hay's on the floor, and we feed our hay 4 or 5 times a day, so it's not just one mass. So it's constant, hopefully the constant grazing for them, rather than one mass in the morning and then they've got to wait till 6 o'clock at night or something till the next lot. But yes, that's sort of where where we are low energy feed when the horses are coming back into work and just doing the slow work and the building up work. It's not the time of year, the winter, that I would be feeding the competition mixes or that sort of feed for them, because if you suddenly get a snow days or something and they're cooped up, it's very high protein that the horses really don't need for that time of year in the type of work that they'll be in building up, is my opinion. But David might inform me or educate me very well there to tell me different things. But I feed hay and haylage, and we always have done, and the ones that can tie up or sensitive are just hay. But I like to feed both. They get a bit of variety. They're always very excited to get the other things, so they're always hunting. They're always eating, not hunting. They're always eating. So yeah, constant grazing, head down, not too much high energy feeds at all. I'm very, very basic in the winter. It's just about the build up and conditioning for a season ahead.
Perfect. David, anything to add to that in terms of?
No, but when Piggy mentioned clipping, I want to ask her what she thinks are the best clippers.
Oh, well, I'm not the one to ask that at all, because I don't do that job. It would take me about 5 hours to clip one, I think. So I have very brilliant people around me for lots of things in my life, because I'm actually pretty useless at most things. But yeah, clipping's not one. I think Lister, is Lister clippers. That's right, is it?
Yeah.
I think we keep packaging them off to be sharpened and things. So I think that's.
I hear a lot of things. Most people seem to be saying it's not the individual brand. It's the fact that people don't clean them and oil them properly.
Yeah. And the different types of blades. You can have a very good clipping person that clips a grey horse with fine blades or something, and it looks like you've gone at it with a knife and fork for a while, or I've tried to clip it, and well, our blades are regularly sharpened, and I think horses do have different skin colours, different hair types. I don't think it's quite as simple, which is why I stay away from it and won't have too much of an input here, because it sounds like I know what I'm talking about and I actually really don't. So but it can, I think all that clearly helps. The right blades, clean blades, good person clipping, surely.
Okay, I'm going to rattle through a couple of extra questions that are in. So again, another call out for questions. If you've got anything you want to ask, now is your chance. Do you have any tips on keeping hooves in good condition when they're being stabled? But I'd also add into that, Piggy, you mentioned them going out in the muddy fields in the winter and ripping shoes off, which obviously doesn't help. But actually, if horses are turning out, is there anything you can do or should do to help keep them in tip-top condition there as well?
I think we just regularly clean the feet out, from even coming out of their stable. You definitely clean, clean front of the bedding. It's usually dry and clean at the front of their stable, but they have their feet cleaned out 2-3 times a day at least, in the morning before they go on the walker, before they come out of the stable to be ridden. Coming back in from the field, they'd have their feet checked after riding, so you haven't got a stone in there or something. And touch wood, it is we haven't had problems with the feet, but yes, I mean, anything stood in wet conditions, whether it's wet stable, they're stood on a damp floor or damp field a lot, and it is going to soften and be harder to keep clean. But in our system, we're quite lucky in that way, because it is everything is clean, and the feet are cleaned out regularly, that it is hopefully not too much of a concern. But David might have experienced a lot more there.
No, I don't.
How to manage
is where you keep having the change from wet to dry to wet to dry. That seems to be can create problems. And certain beddings, I mean, paper and cardboard can tend to dry the feet out quite a lot. I mean, large chip wood chip, in my experience, don't tend to create too much of a problem. Um, Funny enough, I had a student who did some research on different treatments, dressings for hooves, and she worked with some farriers, and they came to the conclusion that the best regimen was lard applied every other day. So
Right.
that was the best. Um, that
It's
was
nice.
I can imagine it's fun and messy to do, but it's a lot cheaper than some of the options out there, I would say.
yeah. I think you can overdress them, and you can probably overwash them as well.
Yeah.
Okay, this one is for you, David, and it kind of picks up on we've talked a good bit about dust levels and that sort of thing, and asthma and everything else. But Alice has asked, we try to be super hot on dust levels, but have one or two that seem to be really sensitive. What is the best ways of reducing the dust burdens? Largely stuck with the forage and bedding that they have. Stables done without horse inside. Thoroughly swept out daily. Forage changed daily. Soaked hay for a minimum of 30 minutes for the very sensitive, which they then refuse to eat. Horses love to keep us on our toes, don't they?
Yeah. Right. So tricky. I mean, ventilation is hopefully something you can control. So really, making sure you keep the ventilation open. If it's cold, put an extra rug on. I think the other thing is stables done without horses. That's great. I think the other thing is not grooming your horse in their box. Swept out daily, forage changed daily, soaked hay, which they then refuse to eat. Yeah, okay. I mean, if
They're stumping you too.
the steaming, I guess, would be an issue. Obviously, that's quite a capital investment. You could try soaking for less time. Um, if you're not trying to reduce the sugar content and the water soluble carbohydrate content, you're just really looking to damp down the dust, then really just a quick dunk may be better. You could try warmer water. Rather, if you're using cold, try warm. If you're using warm, try cold. I mean, if you're not panicked by the mention of molasses, you could make a little bit of sort of, put some molasses with some hot water and pour that over to change the smell. Yeah, I mean, if you're stuck with what you've got, then on the beddings, that's a tricky one because if the bedding is really, really dusty, that's probably going to be your biggest issue. So now there are some things we've been looking at as potential treatments for dusty bedding, but yeah, that's where your biggest source of dust is going to be, is unfortunately going to be your beddings. So yeah, that's a tricky one.
There's a few suggestions there.
Yeah.
There's a few things.
Can I butt in just for
absolutely.
using David? Well, got him. Soaked hay or steamed hay? Is there a? I might have missed this earlier. You might have even said it earlier. I don't know. What are your views on that? How different is that, or is one definitely way better than the other, or is that not?
I mean, from a dust reduction point of view, soaking or steaming, it doesn't really matter. If you're trying to reduce the energy content of the forage, then it's soaking. But you might also, if you're soaking for long periods, you might want to soak and then steam. If you've got horses that are prone to impaction colic, soaked or steamed. If you are mixing in straw with hay, as weight control, then I would definitely want to. I prefer to steam the straw rather than soak it. Does make it more palatable.
Uh,
But really, you're probably not trying to reduce the energy content of your hay.
no.
So if it's really about controlling the dust, then I'd be steaming. Um,
Okay. Cool.
but soaking works just as well.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
a bit more of a fag because you end up with all that dirty water.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then again, I guess it depends if you're on a water meter as well.
Yeah. Exactly.
That can end up being quite expensive if you're
Yeah. It can. It can.
people.
I was packed in for a while, and the difference of the electricity bill was quite scary when it did pack up.
So potentially a steamer might be a more cost-effective.
Yeah.
Maybe swings and roundabouts.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, if you're trying to reduce dust, steamed or soaked. If you're trying to reduce the energy content, then weight control, laminitic cushions, overweight horses, then it's really got to be soaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, there is one question here. David, many different sizes of shavings. There's a plethora of choice out there with different thicknesses and sizings. Is there an optimum? Is there actually this is by and large, the best size?
That's an interesting question. I think the risk is, what's interesting, I've been in some places where they're making shavings and they show me these lovely shavings and, they go, oh, look, there's no dust. And then I say, okay, well, can you open a bale? And you open the bale and it's really, really dusty because what's happened is the shavings are really quite thin. So when they've been packaged down, it suddenly creates a lot of dust. And then if your horse is walking around on them and they're breaking up, that's going to create dust. So I think if there's an issue for me with really thin, sort of like soft shavings, and that they're more likely to create dust.
Okay, the bigger the better.
Maybe not when they're made, but once they've been packaged and in use, they're going to create more dust. So a bigger shaving, the horse isn't going to tread on that and break it up.
Okay.
Probably going to be, yeah. There'll be a size. I think it's just that you want to avoid the really thin, fine shavings because they're likely going to be break up and create a lot of dust.
Okay, perfect. I've got a nice comment in from Claire, which goes back to is it REM or REM sleep? Both of those. Noticed their horse when alone in a paddock on individual turnout. The horse always came into the stable and slept every morning, but now he shares a paddock. This has stopped and he sleeps alongside his field mate and has loads of energy first thing in the morning, which he never did when he was alone.
Interesting. So he doesn't feel comfortable to lay down when he's on his own, but he's happy to lay down when he's got
his mate with him.
His mate. That's cute.
It's really nice. You like to think that one of them, does the first shift and one of them does the late shift, and they do a bit of teamwork, and
they're
both up and ready to go. Yeah.
Ah, nice.
Okay. I love that. If there are any other questions, then please feel free to send them in. Piggy, just while we see if there's any others, end of the season coming up, we've sort of got the last couple of weeks left. What does it look like for you?
Very quiet, actually. I've just got one competing at Osby on Saturday, and actually we're all finished for 2025. We're currently horses are going on holiday. We're emptying all of our stables, rotating the horses around. We actually empty them totally out at the end of the year if we can, and pressure wash. And good deep clean to an air and cobwebbed and everything, and start again. So that is sort of where we're getting to at the minute. But yes, just one more on Saturday. So getting to the end of it now.
Ready for a winter break. And actually, you said the C word, cobwebs, which I feel like is when we were talking about, making sure that there was dust free and all the rest of it.
Yes.
We took away, we didn't talk about the obvious thing of make sure you dust your stables, because
Yes,
actually
I know.
they get really dirty and cobwebby.
They do really
yeah.
easily. And we think our stables are quite clean, and our yard was new when I moved there 12 years ago. And we think we're pretty clean and tidy. But the cobwebs, it's a problem.
To be fair, I feel that in my house as well. They
Yes,
just
I know.
keep coming back.
Exactly. Forever, you get to the other end and then you've got to start again with the duster and things. Yes, pesky spiders. But yeah, so we're having a really good clean and then a varnish at the front of the stables and everything and get going. So no, all smartening up, freshening up, ready to bring back in off the holidays and go again.
Go again for 2026. Okay, there's a few questions coming in. So last call for questions. If you have got anything you want to ask, now is your chance, because we'll be wrapping up in a moment. Dawn's actually come up with a great suggestion, or a great question, I should say. Are dust blowers a good idea to move the dust, or do they cause more problems by putting particles in the air, David?
Well, yeah, they create a lot of dust, and whether they actually do move the dust out or they just put the dust into the air and then you need to wait an hour for it to settle again. I think outside they're fine. I mean, I use them in the garden, but blowing leaves and stuff. But yeah, I probably wouldn't. I probably wouldn't use them inside in a stable. I think the less dust you can create, even really vigorous brushing is going to create dust into the air. And if you're lucky, you can have a nice stable vacuum that you can run up and down.
Oh, yeah. Imagine. Okay, imagine a yard Dyson. Right, Henry Hoover. Debbie's come up with a good suggestion. She says, I have a wheelbarrow in which have drilled holes in the bottom, put hay in, hose it, then leave the barrow over a drain. It removes the dust, doesn't overly remove sugar, and the hay remains palatable with no yucky water. Sounds ideal. Okay, chopped straw.
That will have some effect in reducing dust. It probably won't be quite as effective as thorough soaking or steaming, but I'm sure, depending on how many holes you've got, if it fills up and then drains, it's going to reduce the dust significantly. It's a good suggestion.
Chopped straw. Is there an opinion on chopped straw, David?
Straw from the field tends to be, just because of our climate, tends to be have quite a lot of pollen, mites, molds on. It doesn't tend to be that clean unless it's processed, and I know some of them are. But it comes down to the individual product. I'm not sure. We've tested about 24 beddings on the market. Be amazed how many beddings there are on the market. And I off the top of my head, I can't remember if that's one we've tested. But if people have a look on our website, you'll find all the results of the testing. And you can find one straw product that is really low dust, and you can find another one that's pretty filthy. So it's not chopped straw per se, it's the individual product. Whether it's been oven dried or whether it's just been field dried and packaged, and it depends on how the product's actually produced.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, message in from Pat. Have a very wet mare. What size of bedding do you feel is the most absorbent? At the moment, she's bedded on top of rubber mats with small shavings, and she gets through a lot every single day.
Yeah, I might be tempted to use some of the. Well, first of all, I might be interested in why the mare's drinking so much. If it's very high salt intake, we find some horses that don't use salt blocks at all, and others that eat them in a week. If it's high salt intake, that could be a reason. Potentially there's other reasons, urinary tract infection or psychogenic polydipsia, which is just a behavioural increased drinking, Cushing's. There's various reasons why the mare might be obviously to be urinating a lot. She's got to be drinking a lot. So that would be the question: is why is she drinking so much? But I'd probably think about using some pellets underneath the bedding. There's quite a few good pellets out there. Again, we've tested a few of those and they're pretty clean. So that would be my choice to reduce the amount of bedding you're getting through, is to use some say even some straw pellets underneath.
And things like straw mats, actually, they're a very affordable option. They're good for the environment. You do kind of tick a lot of boxes at the same time. Okay, last question I think we are on. Are there any studies, Pig, on, and David, to be fair, on whether there's an optimum length of holiday at the end of the year? Read somewhere muscle loss starts after approximately 3 weeks. She wants to maximize brain reset, but limit how much strength and muscle is lost, especially for the young horses that are still building a basic muscle mass.
Yeah, I'm not a keen one to give them too long. I mean, it really depends on the type of horse as well, a little bit, I think. Like with the younger horses, I'd probably do a bit, I'd give them a few more breaks a year than just one at the end. Obviously, they naturally get that anyway because of our competition commitment. So, suddenly you get a 3-day spell that you get away for a few weeks so they can end up having a quieter time and get going again. But yes, I definitely, I think, and I'd be interested what David said, but I think the old-fashioned days are gone unless they're having a year out from a tendon or an injury or something like that, and then you spend a long time building them back up to competition fitness again. But I think, gone are the days that they do finish in September and you turn them out till Christmas or the New Year, and then you bring them back in the beginning of January and you start eventing in March. I think the seasons are so much longer. And yes, I think sort of depending on your type of horse and what it needs and the reasons for the holiday, I'd say a month to 6 weeks can be plenty, and even 6 weeks can be too much for certain types of horses. But David will know a lot more about that than me. But also some need, if they've had feet issues and the farrier's like desperate to be like, it needs its shoes off and trim the foot right back, and it's got to learn to get a stronger foot, and it can only do that naturally. And actually being out this time of year and the ground's not, it's a bad time of year to do that in the summer, I found in experience, when the ground's hard and you've got shoes off, and you can actually do more damage. But when the ground's a bit softer and you can actually give them a bit of time to, feed them properly and the hoof get better, or for injury or certain issues. But you've just got to be aware of that, of how long you then take to get them fit or think they're ready then to be conditioned enough for work and the type of work when they're back in.
I mean, the interesting thing is that horses, if a human sort of runner or athlete has kind of 6 weeks off, they'd lose a huge amount of fitness.
Yeah.
Studies that have been done on horses show that they actually maintain their fitness a lot better. So that is, and also the idea, Piggy, about sort of keeping them up at up at this level for the whole season. That's definitely not something necessary. That idea that you perhaps drop them back and then bring them up and drop them back and bring them up, probably a much better way. I do always remember the horses that we had in the Animal Health Trust. We had about somewhere between 12 and 20 horses that we used in different studies of fitness and respiratory disease. I remember we had the most problems when we turned them out. So they were fine when they were in work. As soon as you turn them out, suddenly half of them are lame.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a tough one, and it does come down to some horses seem absolutely lost when you give them time off. They
Yeah.
stand by the gate. You
Yeah.
know, you think, go, have a holiday, and they're just standing by the
Yeah.
gate saying, "I want to come in. I want to be ridden."
Yeah. We never give ours holidays at home. We can't. They don't switch off. It's like me trying to have a holiday at home. It's like it just doesn't. Your work environment. They're used to their routines. Even we do, but our fields are off the yard. Just down the road. Big fields, big hedges, a very different environment, and it's very interesting to see their personality. They do switch off. They don't stand at the gate. Where any of the fields at home, you can't just suddenly say, right, you're out for a month, bye. They're like, no, this doesn't happen. We come in, and they just stand at the gate the whole time. It's like, oh. But yeah, so you would say keep them, but then you also just said it's good for them to, I quite like that down and up. But they are all quite different though, aren't they? And some you can feel, especially with young ones, I think they've learnt something and they have a bit of time out and come back, and that's, they can feel much better. You can feel like they've gone away and been schooled by someone else and come back and feel like they've learnt a lot, and it's like actually it's grown, its body's had time to do something naturally with itself, and it's come back in feeling a lot better. But you can also get those ones that you turn away and go, this feels terrible. What's going on what's going on here?
One thing before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask Pete, how long have you been using Bedmax?
Oh gosh, I don't know. As long as I can remember, really. I mean, definitely since I've been at this yard, which is 12 years.
Okay.
It was what I wanted. I moved after, from my old yard. I moved to the, brand new, beautiful yard. And I wanted it to be exactly how I wanted it to be from the off. And we did do a lot of research, and we did do a lot of, obviously business side of things. You're wanting the best deal or that sort of thing when you start. And it came down to, no, I just want what I think looks the best and is the best. So it was the moment I moved there, that was the choice. And over years we've got a relationship with Bedmax, and I'm now supported by them, which is brilliant because it's happy days. It would be my choice, but it really was my choice at 12 years ago. And
the only reason I'm kind of interested in this is because normally doing these sort of webinars and talking to riders, we spend a lot more time talking about respiratory problems.
Oh.
So, and you don't really seem to, genuinely, you don't really seem to have a respiratory problem. We've hardly focused on it. And as I say, that's really interesting because normally I spend probably half of a webinar talking about, well, yeah, but what about this bedding? And I have this horse that coughs all the time, and my vet's always in and telling me,
Yeah.
we're not talking about respiratory problems. So it's obviously not. It's going to be everything you're doing, but as I've said time and time again, for me, the main thing that determines your air quality in your stable is going to be your bedding, because that's where most of the problems are going to come in. So it's nice for once to be talking to a rider who doesn't have a lot of respiratory problems.
Well, that's good. That's good that I've made a good choice then.
Yeah.
I've done plenty of bad choices over my years of various bits and pieces, but no, it's good to know. Thanks, thanks, David. No, it's interesting. No, I really haven't. So that's, that's obviously a plus.
Touch wood.
Touch wood.
I was going to say, I feel like we should knock on something here.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, I think that's a lovely way to wrap up a thoroughly enjoyable evening.
Yes.
And it actually was very, very topical to finish on that note as well, because this webinar, The Perfect Stable, where horse health and performance come together, has been brought to you by Bedmax in partnership with Animal Web. David, which is a project that you were behind, and you're really, really passionate about ultimately, educating people and giving people kind of science behind their choices. There's a whole wealth of different knowledge. There's tons of different webinars as well that people can get involved with. If they want to find out more information, where do they go?
Animal Web.
There you go. And Bedmax, again, they're passionate about helping horses to be as healthy and as happy as possible. And ultimately that builds in performance as well. I think Piggy's, endorsement at the end there pretty much sums it up as to actually just how much it works for her. And actually, it is such a key part of her team, and it makes a massive, massive difference. So it's a huge component to keep in mind. bedmaxshavings.co.uk for all of the information that you need on Bedmax if you want to find a stockist near you. And they have lots of other different options, the Straw Max, straw pellet bedding, as I say, Little Max as well. There's a few different options in there. There's basically no waste, which I have to say I really like because it's very environmentally friendly also. So go and find out some more information there. But ultimately, Bedmax and Animal Web, massive thank you to them both for hosting this evening. But we really hope that actually you've come away and you've learned something, and that you've gone away and you will feel that a little bit more confident to implement something in day-to-day life as well, because ultimately that's what it's about. It's about helping our horses to be as happy and as healthy as possible. So David, Piggy, thank you both so much. It has been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Piggy.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks very much, guys. No.
Thank you to everybody who's tuned in as well. A massive, massive thank you for joining us. And you can listen back to the recording in full. I think it will be sent out after this evening as well. So if you've missed anything or you joined a little bit way through, then you can go back and listen to it full. But massive thank you for joining us as well. Bye for now.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.